In the last lecture, we saw how ammonia synthesis rates could be mapped onto a single descriptor, the dissociative chemisorption energy of nitrogen. Scaling relations can always reduce the number of independent variables we need to describe to specify the rate, but it's not always possible to reduce the rate onto just one descriptor variable. An example reaction in which two descriptors are needed is the hydrogenation of CO to form methane. So here we have a series of elementary steps for this reaction. We have adsorption of CO, dissociative adsorption of hydrogen, dissociation of CO to form adsorbed carbon and oxygen atoms, and then sequential hydrogenation of that carbon to form CH, CH2, CH3, and then finally methane. The oxygen is cleared off the surface by hydrogenation as well to form OH and then water. So in this reaction mechanism, you can see that the surface will be populated by CHX types intermediates whose adsorption energies are going to scale with that of carbon. But we also have these OHX types intermediates which don't scale with carbon. The adsorption energy of OH does scale with the adsorption energy of oxygen atoms, so now we can write the rate as a function of two descriptors, the carbon and oxygen adsorption energies as well as temperatures and pressures. This plot shows an activity heat map of CO hydrogenation rates versus binding energies of oxygen and carbon. Here the red indicates the highest activity and the blue indicates the lowest. So this is analogous to a topographic map where the elevation is analogous to activity. You can see that the optimal catalysts bind both carbon and oxygen with intermediate strength, with lower activity being observed for catalysts that bind too strongly or too weakly. So here we can draw some insights about which catalysts are best and why. There are many catalysts that bind carbon with a near optimal binding energy, but the more oxophobic metals, like platinum and palladium here, bind oxygen far too weakly, which means that they'll have a harder time dissociating carbon monoxide, which requires binding oxygen. Meanwhile, metals bind oxygen far too strongly and lead to high surface coverages. Cobalt and ruthenium are the most active catalysts for this chemistry, but nickel is more commonly used because it's cheap. This descriptor model also gives us a method for designing better catalytic materials. So we see here that nickel and iron straddle the top of the activity volcano, so if an alloy could interpolate between the properties of the two metals, it could access higher activity. So that's in fact what's seen experimentally. So an alloy of nickel and iron has higher activity than either of the pure elements. So here we've seen how volcano plots can be used for multiple descriptors, and next time we'll see how this can be used to understand and predict selectivity when we have multiple reactions.